Hello guys, welcome back to the DP World Tour Tour Junkies preview show. I am your host Mark Hill and I am back in London this week. And no, I'm not recording in a hotel room this time. I thought I would drop into the office at closing in on 1 a.m. here, trying to get a podcast put together. Listen, one of those ones where we have to get a show on the road. I am happy enough to be recording after a few Guinnesses earlier. My podcast juice now is some sparkling water because I have an 8 a.m. meeting and a 9 a.m. meeting, so I'm not going to drag it out too much longer. Let's just get into the course breakdown and key stats. We are at Ras Al Khaimah again for the second week in a row, the Ras Al Khaimah Classic. This week, the course, according to the DP World Tour website, is set up exactly the same as last week, which is a par 72, 7,325 yard Peter Harradine designed course at Alhambra Golf Club. Enjoyed the process last week in terms of attacking a new course on the DP World Tour. We've seen it on the Challenge Tour before. And to be fair, I think the handicap of it was pretty spot on. Like, we put a premium on off the tee. We put a premium on distance, GIR. And if you look at the running theme last week, we had Nicolai Hojgaard first off the tee, Jordan Smith second off the tee, and they finished 1 and 2 on the leaderboard in the end. So, yeah, overall, very happy with the handicap. 5 out of 5 again in terms of making it through the cut, which is all we can ask for at the minute. So, we're knocking on the door. We had Jordan Smith, runner-up, second place finish, didn't quite get there. And listen, it's one of those ones again where I think we might land on a few extra trends this week to help us get across the line. So obviously we have a round or 2 or 4 to look at from last week. We get a bit of a feel for that. We can look at some things that came out of it as well. So one thing I didn't really consider last week was that there may be a draw bias. And looking at it, there were 2 out of 14 golfers teed off in the PM wave last week. So there's definitely a draw bias in terms of the AM tee times. That was after 54 holes. So looking at the top 14, only 2 of them had played the PM wave on the Thursday. So factor that in, put a little bit of extra weight onto that in terms of a potential draw bias there. Other things that I looked at, so I probably put too much weight into the pass pulling performances at Abu Dhabi 2 weeks previous. Again, extended that data sample or that range sample out. Didn't just go short term putting on pass pulling, went a bit longer term. Looked at some other tournaments around the world where these guys have been teeing it up on pass pulling surfaces. Again, conditions this week are very, very similar. So last week, 3 rounds, relatively calm, benign. Wind picks up a little bit in the afternoon. This time around, looks exactly the same in terms of forecast. Picks up a little bit on the Sunday, gets a little bit more competitive round there in terms of the wind side of things. But outside of that, Monday or Thursday through to Saturday looks relatively tame. So much of the same handicapping going into this week as was the case last week. One other element is golfers that are maybe overworked. So these guys are out of their least at the minute. They've been out there for 4 to 5 weeks, some longer. The Hojgaard twins were out there, I think, nearly 6 weeks now. They've been out there. Obviously, Nicolai won last week. But overall, I do think there's a bit of a disadvantage of making the cut on 4 consecutive weeks or 3 consecutive weeks, 4 in some cases, where you're putting in 12, 14, 16 rounds of golf. It's bound to be taking a toll. You're out in the Middle East. It's not like you're going down the local pub, having a bit of crack, letting some steam off. It's not quite that culturally that way inclined. So, yeah, I definitely have factored in a little bit, put more weight on guys that are a little bit fresher in terms of their overall rounds at the minute and seeing whether we can come up with a winner. So let's look at the top of the betting board. I'll take a little sip of my sparkling water infused with wonky lemons, according to Dash Water. I say I did have a couple of Guinnesses earlier, but yeah, early start, get this show recorded, get to bed, office, hotel, literally 2 minutes away. I'm happy enough to go through the top of the boards. Let's have a sip of this sparkling water and get into the top of the betting board. So, top of the betting board then, Nicolai Hojgaard coming in at 14-1, Jordan Smith at 16-1. So you're 1 and 2 from last week. What can I do these guys? Jordan Smith was second place finish. I do have reservations though. 4th consecutive week. Yes, he's been trending in the right direction. It's very hard to go one better than he did last week, where he looked at a peak performance, 20 under par. Any other tournament, if Nicolai Hojgaard didn't run away with it, probably would have been very competitive in the mix. Robert McIntyre, running theme on this podcast, can't really get to him at the minute. Yes, there was glimpses throughout last week. He has the game to compete here and be up there near the top of the board, but overall not trending quite in the direction I would want. Rasmus Højgaard definitely had a strong look at him, but again, not seeing enough of the recent form, despite having him on my card last week. Adrian Meronk and Nicolai Hojgaard, we'll talk about them a little bit more in a second. Which brings me to my first pick. I'm going to rattle through these fairly quickly tonight compared to usual. Don't have all my show notes as I usually would. So Nicolai Hojgaard, 14-1, widely available. Yes, I am going to last week's tournament winner. He was a cut above the rest of the field last week, close to flawless performance. Be hard to reach that again, but I can't rule it out for a golfer of his quality. He's starting to show glimpses that he's going to be the long-term Højgaard brother that really stands out and excels. I know at junior and amateur level that was the case to a degree. It really looks now that he's found something in his game, and yeah, I put him up last week. I faded him against Rasmus, so I put up Rasmus over Nicolai Hojgaard. That backfired dramatically. I put too much weight into those back-to-back missed cuts, and ultimately learnt my lesson in terms of trying to go for golfers a bit fresher. This week around, yeah, happy enough to look at Nicolai in a lot more detail. He, overpowered the track. Won't necessarily have the fatigue to deal with after those back-to-back missed cuts, and he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's going to get too waylaid or too distracted out in the Middle East. I'm happy enough. Yes, we're taking a shorter price at 14-1 compared to the 33-1 that he went off at last week, but I am happy enough to have Nicolai Hojgaard starting my card at 14-1. Next up is Adrian Meronk at 25-1. On him last week, going back to the well again here. Birdie Fest expected, has the ability to shoot low, shot a 63 at the Dubai Championship, wasn't too far away in terms of recent form. Knocking on the door consecutively, gradual improvement round by round. He's definitely going to be a winner in 2022. A lot of people jumped off him after fancying him last week. We're getting a slightly bigger price, 25-1. Best price at BetChris at 30-1. Last week took him at 22-1. Yeah, I think there's enough to like him. He has to overcome an afternoon tee time, which is a slight negative, as touched upon, if there is that draw bias in place. That's my only real concern. He has enough skill set to overcome this course, learn from last week, and progress. So Adrian Meronk at 25-1 is my second selection. My third pick goes against the grain in terms of the off the tee side of things. Richard Bland at 40-1 with William Hill, PointsBet, and Sky Bet. Best price 58-1 with BetChris. Yeah, disappointing miscut last week, and an afternoon tee time to overcome. So my split this week was 3 guys going in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. But Blandy, yeah, he is a fully motivated gentleman coming into this, a senior gentleman who won't be far away from the Champions Tour, having listened to the Sky Sports podcast, golf podcast this week. Yeah, Blandy was on it. Talked in depth about how it went a little to his head last week coming into the tournament as the top ranked guy in the official World Golf Rankings. He's knocking on the board. Listen, we're coming up to the end of February, 3 weeks away, where Players' Championship qualification is at stake. So on the 28th of February, top 50 in the world will reach the Players' Championship, which is obviously the 5th major unofficially. And then come the end of March, it's all about Masters qualification. Richard Bland at 49 years of age is right there in the mix to get there. And another strong showing this week would go a long way. He impressed me dramatically last 2 weeks ago, when he obviously lost out in the playoff. But since then, the way he was talking this week on the Sky Sports Bet podcast, and yes, I don't like to lean into narrative too much. I can look at the overall skill set and say that this guy is still keeping up with some of the form he displayed in 2021. But the resolve and the, how can I put it, the determination that a guy at 49 years of age is showing to really stay at the top of his game. He talked in detail about all his wedge play and his approach play and everything that goes into hit to really make him stand out within a certain range and proximity. And to be honest, I think last week probably will be a blessing in disguise for him. The miscut, major disappointment, but he does want to follow it up with another miscut. This guy is motivated now to get all back in line and get his game together. So Richard Bland, listen, come 20th of February, he's going to make the Players' Championship. Come 20th of March, he's going to make the Masters and then retire off into the sunset in his 50s into the Champions Tour. Richard Bland, 40-1. Last week's senior moment was Padraig Harrington, made the cut, fairly competitive. This week, it's Richard Bland. Next selection is Matthieu Pavon at 55-1. Another guy that I faded last week in DFS. I was largely concerned over the COVID side of things, where he had been over in Dubai early enough and then tested positive for COVID the Wednesday night before he was set to tee off on the opening tournament in this Middle Eastern swing. Listen, we saw him play last week, and he really didn't look like a golfer showing much sign of rust. Took a little bit to get going through the opening 9 holes. Once he got going, though, found his way to a 7th-placed finish. He's going to be lightly golfed in terms of competitive rounds under his belt. That's no bad thing. I think a bit of freshness here when a lot of guys are coming off 4 consecutive tournaments, a lot of rounds under their belts. Coming out a little bit fresher, had a good look at the course last week. He has a weakness in terms of around the green, that I don't think plays into too much here. Enough to the rest of his game to be competitive. So Matthieu Pavon at 55-1 with bet 365 and bet MGM is my 4th pick. And then I am going back to Frederic LaCroix at 150-1 this week. Took him last week 130-1. Again, long enough off the tee to contend, one of the tour graduates from the Challenge Tour. He's making my card for the 2nd week in a row. Solid GIR numbers. Showed enough again last week where made it through the cut. Relatively good numbers overall. And I think a golfer that is going to go up and up over the next year. So Frederic LaCroix is my 5th pick at 150-1. Let's jump into the DFS side of things then. 9K range, touched upon a few of these guys already. Obviously, Nicolai Hojgaard, 11,200. I am going to go to the top of the board. I think a lot of guys will naturally pivot off last week's winner. I'm happy enough to take a stab there. Adrian Meronk at 9,900 and Richard Bland at 9,300 are the 9K and above golfers that I like this week. My fade is going to be Jordan Smith. Bet him on the outright card last week. As I touched upon, he was trending extremely well in terms of recent form. Can't knock those numbers at all. This time, it's hard, as I said, to back up that 2nd place finish last week and go one better. I think he can be competitive, but it is a lot of rounds of golf that he's coming off. Felt like a peak performance at 20 under. Main weakness to his game is the putter, and I'm not sure he can repeat that performance. Definitely see he gained over 4 strokes last week with a putter. That's way above his general baseline. I don't see that being sustainable for Jordan Smith long term. I think he can certainly make it through the cut again, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is a down week for him and he doesn't repeat his Challenge Tour win here and then the 20 under last week, which did look like a strong performance. So I'm going to fade Jordan Smith in that 10,900 price point. In the 8K range, Rafa Cabrera Bello at 8,700. A little bit concerned over the number of rounds of golf he's played lately, but I'm going to have a stab on him. Matthieu Pavon at 8,300. Callum Shinkwin, 8,100. Shinkwin, nice early tee time, going off at a decent price point. Has all the distance off the tee, doesn't have the consistency, but we'll take a stab at 8,100. My fade is going to be JB Hansen at 8,600. So like Smith, a lot of rounds under his belt lately. Little to show for it, though, in terms of form, unlike Smith. Don't see the pre-Christmas JB Hansen out there at the minute. One of these golfers that I'll probably reevaluate after this tournament this week. Got a 3-week layoff in terms of the European or DP World Tour side of things. So I'm definitely going to reevaluate him, have a look to maybe get back on the Dane after the next break, but I'm happy enough to stay away from him this time. 7K range, Andy Sullivan, 7,800. Jeff Winter at 7,500. Tapio Pulkkinen at 7,300. My fade in this range is going to be Fabrizio Zanotti. Afternoon tee time to come off to get away with. A lot of rounds clocked up lately, below average in terms of distance off the tee. Against his overall baseline, he's trending in the wrong direction. So looked at some of the trending numbers on Data Golf this week, sort of put some more extra weight into that. Generally, he is making the cut week to week. Like he had a T18 in one round as well, or one tournament as well. So there's glimpses that he's there, but I just don't see the all-round game. There's a bit of a plateau overall to him at the minute, and I'm happy enough to fade him at 7,500. And then the 6K range. So Frederic LaCroix, 6,700. Xander Lombard, 6,600. And Nicholas Norgard Moller at 6,900. Another Challenge Tour graduate making it on to my DFS pool there. My best bet this week then. And I definitely like Nicolai Hojgaard, top 20 at -105, 1.95 decimal. Available with Caesars and William Hill to be a top 20 finish. Good down to -115 for me. I don't see a big come down from last week. I think he's definitely up there in terms of the overall game that he has got together at the minute. A lot of motivation. Again, another golfer who can fly up the world rankings this year and get into some serious tournaments and entries. And yeah, it'd be difficult to repeat the -24. But are you telling me that Nicolai Hojgaard can't get another top 20 once he makes it through the cut this week? Yeah, I'm having him on side. So Nicolai Hojgaard, top 20 at -105 with Caesars and William Hill. Guys, it's been a delight. It has been a very short podcast this week compared to what I usually put together, but I am very happy to at least get something recorded for the Tour Junkies guys. Couple of weeks off now. Cancellations due to COVID and everything else. I think we're looping back with the Indian Open in a few weeks' time. But it has been an absolute pleasure. Check out the rest of the content the guys are putting out. I think Garrett's getting his show put together this evening as well. I'm sure Pat will pontificate a little bit on his side of things. Obviously, check out the PGA Tour preview show from the guys last night, both on the betting and DFS side of things. And hit like and subscribe on the podcast feed and on YouTube channels. I'll try and chip in with some chat in the Nut Hut tomorrow and also reply to any comments on Twitter and YouTube. But that's it for me tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Good night. I'm off to bed.